A solid understanding of CSS Flexbox will take you a step closer to creating responsive websites. Hi, welcome to Web Dev in 10, and in today's video, I'm going to be giving you a thorough explanation of CSS Flexbox. So that I can properly understand the Flexbox concepts, I'm going to be explaining both practically and theoretically. So for every concept I talk about, we're going to be checking out the practical application immediately. So let's get started. So what is Flexbox? Flexbox is a powerful CSS layout model that provides a flexible and efficient way to arrange items within a container. So basically, Flexbox gives us an opportunity to rearrange the position or the arrangement of items within a container, and this gives us an higher chance of creating responsive websites. So a basic Flexbox model has two main components, Flexbox container and Flexbox items. The Flexbox container is the parent element that holds and manages the layout of its child element. So it's the one in charge of rearranging the position of the Flexbox items. So Flexbox items are the child elements that the Flexbox container are allowed to rearrange. This is a typical model, a Flexbox model. So we have our section tag, which serves as our Flexbox container, and the three divs right next to each other, which are the Flexbox items. Now, how do we initiate a Flexbox layout? To initiate a Flexbox layout, we have to set the display property of the parent element, which is the Flex container or Flexbox container, to flex in your CSS. Just like we are seeing here, the section which I called the Flexbox container previously, we gave it a display of flex. This will automatically initiate Flexbox layout, letting the browser know that we would like to use Flexbox. Now, arrangement of Flexbox items. The Flexbox container can arrange its items in 4 different directions. We have the row, column, row reverse, and column reverse. So the row is just arranging it horizontally in a row, while column arranges it vertically in a column, and then row reverse, it rearranges this from ascending order to descending order. So it just changes the order and turns it around, and then the same for column reverse. Now, for the flex container to be able to achieve this, it has to use the flex direction property and give it any of these values: row, column, row reverse, or column reverse, just like this. So we can just give a display of flex and flex direction as row or column. Now, there are two main axes in Flexbox container. This is a very important concept. We have to understand this concept. So there are two major axes in the Flexbox container: the main axis and the cross axis. The main axis is the direction determined by the flex direction property. We talked about this just now. So the flex direction property states if it's a row, column, row reverse, or column reverse. So whatever direction you chose, if it's roll, that's horizontal, so our main axis will be horizontal. If the flex direction is column, our main axis will be vertical, while the cross axis is perpendicular to the main axis. So if your flex direction is roll, your cross axis will be vertical, because like our main axis is horizontal. If your flex direction is column, the cross axis will be horizontal, since the main axis is vertical. You have to understand this. Let me give you a model for you to be able to see. So you see this box, we have the flex container right here, this brown colored stuff, and then we have 3 flex items, same here. So when the flex direction is roll, we have our main axis to be horizontal and our cross axis to be vertical, and when the flex direction is column or column reverse, actually our main axis is vertical and our cross axis is horizontal. Because for our flex direction row reverse, like I explained before, it's going to turn the main axis, which means it's going to flip the main axis. We're going to see this when we enter the practical application. So take your time to study this and understand this properly before we go into the practical application. So let's check that out now. I already created a simple HTML file where I added some styling, and in the body I added a section with the class of container, flex container, and 3 divs, just like the layout you saw previously. 3 divs are our flex items. So we have item 1, item 2, and item 3, and give them a class of item 1, 2, 3. And then I gave the items some styling just to make it nicer, a little nice, because like it's still not good. So let's check it out in our browser. So this is what we have currently. 3 items, 1, 2, and 3. Item 2 is a little bigger because I gave it a class of large, increasing the font size to 1.5. So just for us to physically see what's going on. So we have item 1, item 2, and item 3. This is our flex container, and then these are our flex items. Now the first thing we learned is how to initiate Flexbox. To initiate Flexbox, we have to give a display and give it a value of flex in our container. So we have a display and give it a value of flex. So now we've initiated our Flexbox container, and if you check our browser, we can see that it automatically arranges the items in a row. This is because the flex direction property has a default value of role, which means even if you don't add it to, if you don't have the flex direction property to the container, it's going to automatically give it a direction of role because that's the default value. But we can always change this by adding our flex direction to be column. If I should save this, we can see that it changes direction to the vertical. Now for role reverse and column reverse, like I said, role reverse will flip the main axis. So it takes the item at the far left and takes it to the far right. So let's see this. So if you give it a role reverse, you can see like now the items are arranged in item 3, item 2, item 1, which is changing the order. And then the main axis has been flipped. So the item 1 that was at the left is now at the far right. So that is what role reverse does. Same for the column reverse, it flips the main axis. So if you should give it a column reverse instead, we can see it here that it's going to the bottom. It flipped it from the top to the bottom. Let me give it an height of 100 VH so we can see it. Now we can see that the item is at the bottom, but for column it's going to be here. So that's the difference between role and role reverse, column and column reverse. Now that we understand this, you can take your time to like practicalize this, change the directions, try to determine which is the main axis, which is the cross axis when you change the direction. Now, what are the capabilities of the flex container? The flex container is giving the ability to do a few things, but the flex items also have things they can do. But let's first check out the capabilities of the flex container. The first one is aligning flex items. So this controls how flex items are positioned along the cross axis. Flex container is giving the ability to rearrange or to move the flex items along the cross axis. So for a flex direction of rule, just like we have here, a flex direction of rule, the cross axis is vertical, so it aligns the items, giving it the ability to move it either to the top, to the center, to the bottom, or anyhow it likes, but it's along it's sliding along the cross axis. And then same for the flex direction of column, it's sliding along the cross axis, so it's going horizontally left to right or to the center anyhow. So that's the job of aligning items. And then we have justifying flex items. This is just the opposite of aligning flex items. Instead of sliding along the cross axis, it's going to be sliding along the main axis. And then we have wrapping flex items. Wrapping flex items is giving the flex container the ability to put the flex items in a new line when there's no space. The first one we'll be checking out is aligning flex items. Aligning flex items takes place in two ways. This is aligning individual flex items or aligning the flex items as a group. So let's check out aligning individual flex items first. So to align individual flex items, the flex container uses an align items property on its CSS and then gives it one of these values, either stretch, center, baseline, flex start, or flex end. But if the align items property is not added to the container, the default value will be stretch. Now let's check out each one of them. Now for align items stretch, for the stretch value, which is the default value, this instruction tells the browser to make the flex items expand to fill the entire cross axis, which means it's going to fill up the entire cross axis from the top to the bottom for the roll direction, and then from left to right for the column direction. Now let's see this. Just like I said, for the flex direction, each flex item stretches along the cross axis. This is the cross axis, which is vertical. So it stretches all the way to the top and all the way to the bottom. So that's what the stretch does. Now let's move to the next one, which is center. To align items to the center, this tells the browser to make the flex items align at the center of the cross axis. So the center of each item, each flex item is going to be aligned at the center of the cross axis. So just like we see here. So this is the center of the first item, this is the center of the second item, and then this is the center of the third item. And then they pick the center of the cross axis, which is this place where the main axis is. So they all align at the center of the cross axis. They all came together to stay at the center of the cross axis. Same for the flex direction of column. So that is what center does. It just brings them to the center of the cross axis. Now we have the value for baseline. This instruction tells the browser to make the flex item align the base of the first line of the text in them. Instead of aligning the containers themselves, it aligns the text inside the container. So whenever you put a text inside a container, it will have a baseline, which is a line like under the text. So for the flex direction of role, this is the baseline, this red line, and all the text, the first line of each text, the baseline is aligning, which means they are joining together to form a straight line. So that is for flex direction of role. But for flex direction of column, it's a little different. The baseline is horizontal, so is the cross axis. So the baseline are going to be like parallel to each other. Instead of joining together just like the role, they're going to be right on top of each other. So that is align items baseline. And then for flex start, this tells the instruction to make the items align at the start of the cross axis. And where is the start of the cross axis? The start of the cross axis for flex direction of role or role reverse is the top, and then is the left side for the column. Now let's check out the next one, which is flex end. It's just the opposite of flex start. So this instruction tells the browser to make the flex items align at the end of the cross axis. So the end of the cross axis for role is the bottom, and for column is the right side. Now that we understand how to align items individually, let's practicalize it. So to align items individually, like I said, we have to add the align items property, which takes in stretch, center, flex start, flex end, and baseline. So if I don't add anything, what is going to happen? Nothing is happening because I gave the item a fixed width. If I should remove the fixed width on the item, which is fit content, it's going to change. Exactly. So it's going to stretch because this is in column reverse. The cross axis is horizontal, so it stretches along the cross axis horizontally, not vertically. If I change this to roll or row reverse, anyhow, is stretching vertically because that's where the cross axis is. So now if you should add align items, let me just change this to role. Align items to the center. This is the center of the cross axis because this is the entire container. So this is going to be the center of the cross axis. Let's say this is the entire cross axis. This is going to be the center of it right here. So it brought the entire items to the center of the cross axis. Now if I should say baseline, which says it aligns the first line of the text. This is why I gave this a larger text so you can see it. If it's on the baseline, we can see that the bottom of all this is being aligned. But I should give this more text. Let's just give it I'm using the pre-formatted text so that it doesn't change the format. If I save this, can you see it's still aligning the first line? So it's aligning the first line of the text inside the container. Now if we should change this to flex start, you can see like it changes to the top, moves to the top of the cross section, which for role is the top, and then we have flex end, which will go to the end of the cross section, which in this case is the bottom. If I should try this for column, the end of the cross axis on column is the far right, which is the thing there at the moment. So now I want you to take your time and check out how each and every align items property works with different flex direction. So now let's move to the next concept, which is aligning items as a group. So to allow the flex container to align the flex items as a group, we use the align content property in CSS, and it takes in 7 values. So I don't want you to get overwhelmed. Don't worry, it's actually very easy once you understand the concept and how it works. So it takes in stretch, just like align items. It takes in center, flex start, flex end, space between, space around, and space evenly. So for stretch, this tells the instruction to make the lines, can you see the difference? The lines of flex items to expand to fill the entire cross axis of the container. So it also works along the cross axis, but the only difference is it doesn't take in just one flex item into consideration. It takes in an entire line or a row or column of flex items into consideration. So this is an example. So in our previous example, we only had one item in a role and they fill the entire cross axis. But for align contents, it's going to take the entire role and make sure they fill up the entire cross axis. And then we have center. Same way, it takes the entire content and places it in the center instead of a single content. So we have align content center. It leaves the arrangement of the items the way they are, but it takes them as a group, takes the entire item and puts it at the center. So we have flex start, which also takes you to the start of the cross axis, just like this, takes the entire content to the start of the cross axis. And then flex end does the opposite, takes you to the end of the cross axis. And then we have the new concept, which is space between. So this instruction tells the browser to distribute the lines of the flex items evenly along the cross axis, either rows or column, depending on the flex direction, ensuring that the first line is at the start and the last line is at the end of the container with equal spacing between them. So what does this mean? So the first thing it does, it takes the line of the items and ensure there's equal spacing between them. But the little difference is it takes the first line to be at the very start of the cross axis without any space, and takes the last row at the end of the cross axis. We'll see this better when I show you practically, but this is just a visual illustration of space between. And then for space around, the only difference for space around is it has a specific distance from the start of the cross axis and twice of that distance between the end of the first line and the start of the second line, which is 2x here, and then that same distance from the end of the cross axis. And then we have space evenly. This just spaces out the line so that they have equal spacing between them, just like this. So it has equal spacing between each line. Same here, equal spacing. So when does align content matter? Align content only has an effect when the flex wrap property of the flex container is set to wrap. So we'll talk more about flex wrap later, because that's like the third concept about wrapping of items. So it's when the flex wrap is set to wrap, that is the only time the align content is going to work, or else it's not going to work. Now that we have all the values, let's check them out practically. I know a lot of you are confused at the moment, but I'm here to explain. Don't worry. I'm going to change this to role, the direction to role, and then this to flex start. Now the first thing you're going to do is put the flex wrap property as wrap. You don't have to stress yourself about this at the moment. You're still going to understand it, why I'm adding this later. But for now, let's just add it to explain this concept. And then we have the aligned content. Let's place this at the center. What's going to happen? This is going to place the entire line at the center of the cross axis. Now let's save this. Can you see it brought the entire line to the center of the cross axis? But if you check the individual items, they are still in the flex start position, but then we took the entire content and placed it at the center, which shows that align items is not affecting individual flex items. So if I should duplicate this, let's make this, let's create another 3 of this, and then let's reduce the width of the container so we can make it 2 lines. Okay, this is more than 2 lines. Let's make it 30. Okay, so as you can see now, we have 2 lines and both of them are brought to the center. But if I should change the align items to maybe, let's say, center as well. Now the items, each items are placed at the center of the cross axis, but the entire container is also placed at the center of the cross axis. So let's check out other values of align content. Just I want you to just know that align content takes the entire line and doesn't affect individual items. It's the align items that affect individual items. So now let's put the other values, which is flex start. It takes you to the top. Then flex end, that takes it to the bottom of the cross axis. What else? Stretch. It's going to stretch it along the entire cross axis. Can you see this is stretched along the cross and this is stretched, so there's like a spacing there. So that's stretch. And then let's check out space between. So space between. I want to do something so we can see it. Let's remove this. And then create one more rule. So we have space between. So space between works so that the space here is from the padding added to the container. If I should remove that, can you see it's going all the way to the start of the container? If I should give this one more rule, or two, yeah, you can see like there's equal spacing between this and this, equal spacing between this, but the item, the first row is taken to the top and the last row is taken to the bottom. So that's space between. And then there's space around. So space around gives a small space, equal space from here to here, and in the bottom as well they have equal spacing from here to here and from here to here, and also twice of that spacing, two times of the spacing at the middle, just like you saw here. So the spacing at the top and twice of the spacing in between, and then the spacing at the bottom. So that's how space around works. And then space evenly just gives even spacing between each line. So the spacing between each line is going to be even, same spacing between everything. So that's space evenly. So that is align content. And like I said if there was no flex wrap property, the align content would not work. Can you see it's not working unless there's this flex wrap? I want you to take your time here. Take your time and try to work it out with different flex directions. Now let's move to justifying flex items. So this controls how flex items are distributed along the main axis. So align items work with the cross axis. Now we're going to be working with the main axis. For you to be able to justify flex items, you have to use the justify content property on the container. It takes in 6 values, which is center, flex start, flex end, space between, space around, and space evenly. If you notice, they are all having almost the same values, just interchanged. And flex start is the default value. So even if you don't add a justify content, it is automatically going to be flex start. So now let's check out each one of them. So for the first one is center. This instruction tells the browser to make the flex items align at the center of the main axis. So what's the center of the main axis? Right here. So it takes the entire content and places them at the center of the main axis. And then flex start, just like its name, it takes you to the start of the main axis. And where's the start of the main axis? For row, it's going to be the far left, and for column, it's going to be the top. But like we said, for row reverse, it's going to be a little different because we know row reverse flips the main axis. So the start is going to be flipped to the other side and the end to the other side. Same for column reverse, it's going to flip it. Now flex end takes you to the end of the main axis, which is right here or at the bottom. So now let's check out space between. So this instruction tells the browser to distribute the flex items evenly along the main axis, ensuring that the first item is at the start and the last item is at the end of the container with equal spacing between all items. So this works almost like align content space between, but this time it works with each items and also along the main axis, not the cross axis. So let's check an example. As you can see here, the first item is at the start of the main axis and the last item is at the end of the main axis, and then they have equal spacing between them. So that's what space between is. Same for the column direction. And the next thing is space around. Space around, you have a little spacing at the start and at the end, which is going to be the same size. So this is what space around looks like. Just like in align content, it has a distance of x from the start of the container to the start of the first item on each line, and 2 times of that distance along every other flex item, and also x distance from the end of the last item on each line to the end of the container, just like we have in our illustration here. We'll see this better once we get into coding. And then we have space evenly, which spaces the items with equal spacing around them. So they all have equal spacing. Now let's move to the third capability of flex container, which is wrapping flex item. Flex wrapping controls whether the items will move to a new line or stay on a single line. So that's what flex wrapping is. This function is achieved using the flex wrap property. We saw this before, but now we're going to properly understand what it means. So it takes in 3 values: no wrap, wrap and wrap reverse. No wrap is default value, and then this is how you can use it in your flex container. Just use this flex wrap and give it any of the values. So we have an illustration of how everything works. So this is the original container with 3 items. If you give it a flex wrap of no wrap, it means no matter how small the container gets, it is not going to wrap. It is not going to go to the next line. So it will continue shrinking until it gets to a point that it cannot shrink anymore, and then it will overflow. So that is no wrap. And then we have wrap. So this one will take it to a new line. Wrap reverse just change the order of the items, just like row reverse from ascending order to descending order. So that is all about flex wrap. Now let's check out one more property that can be used on the flex container, which is the flex flow. The flex flow property allows us to add flex wrap and flex direction using just one property instead of using 2 different properties for it. So it uses this syntax: flex flow, flex direction, then the flex wrap. So you say the direction and then you say if you want to wrap or not. These are some examples. We have flex flow column wrap, which means give it a column direction and make it wrap, or roll and no wrap, give it a direction of roll and give it a no wrap value. So that is flex flow. It's just like a shorthand. Now one more thing is adding spaces to the flex items. The flex container is allowed to add spaces to the flex items. So we have 2 ways of adding spaces to flex items. You can use these 2 properties, row gap and column gap, or you can just use a single property, which is the gap property. When it comes to using row gap and column gap, it is used somewhat like this. The row, we have 30 pixels and the column gap 10 pixels, just like this. So each row has a spacing of 30 pixels and each column has a spacing of 10 pixels. And then if you want to use the gap property, it's just like a shorthand. You can give it value of 10 pixels. This just means giving a spacing of 10 pixels for the rows and 10 pixels for the columns. Or you could separate them if you want different spacing, as 30 pixels for the rows and 10 pixels for the column. So the gap takes in one value for the row and column, or takes in row value then column value. So the row value comes first and then the column value. Now let's check out everything we've learned so far. We add a justified content to our container and give it a value of center. Let's remove the width here. You can see like all the items are brought to the center. Everything, this line is brought to the center, and this 2 is also brought to the center of the main axis, which is the row in this case. But if the direction was column, aligning them to the center of the main axis of the column, this is not visible because we have too much flex items here, so it's bringing it to the column. Let's check this one here. So it's bringing it to the center of the main axis. Let's change it back to roll. If you put it as flex start, everything is brought to the start of the main axis. But if this was roll reverse, the start of the main axis is now here because the main axis is flipped whenever you use row reverse or column reverse. So flex end takes you to the end, which is here for row reverse, and then we have space between. So this puts spaces, equal spaces in between each item. But the first item and the last item is taken to the far end with no spacing at the edges of the main axis. So that's space between. Can you see there's like a lot of space here because like they are taken to the far end. And then we have space around. For space around, there's going to be a little space around each item. So there's a space here. Let's say this is X. And then there's another X to the somewhere here, and another X from here to the second item, and then here. So you can see like this place looks like 2 times the space that is like at the side here. So that is space around. And then space evenly gives them equal spacing. So now there's equal spacing from here to here, here to here, and here to here, and also between each items. So that's space evenly. Now, just like we've been doing before, you can pause the video, take your time to experiment everything we've learned so far, and don't get things confused. Know where the main axis is, know where the cross axis is, know how align items works, know how justified content works. We talked about flex wrap. So we have flex wrap. We've already seen what flex wrap does. The default value for flex wrap is no wrap, but let's see what it does. Hence, like all the items, they are not wrapping, they don't move to a new line. And then we have wrap reverse. This just changes the order, just like we saw before. So it just reverses it, flipping it over, just like row reverse did. So that's for wrap reverse. And we also checked out spacing. We can use row gap. Let's give it a row gap of 30 pixels. You can't see it because there's already a lot of spacing here. But if you give it a column gap of 40 pixels, you can see there's column gap. But if you want to join the two together, you can just use gap, just one property, which is what you see the most because we developers are very lazy. So you can just put 30 pixels and 40 pixels, which is row then column. After saving that, you can see there's no change, or you can decide to give them equal spacing and just use one value. Just give them 30 pixels. So there's going to be 30 pixels gap between the rows and 30 pixels gap between the columns. So now we can move to the properties of the flex items. Modifying flex items. So we can also modify flex items. You can change how they appear or behave in the container. Even though the container is given the ability to arrange the items anyhow it likes, the flex items are also given a choice to change how they are placed or change their position. So there are 6 main CSS properties given to the flex items to be able to like change their order or appearance. So we have, first one is order. We have flex grow, flex shrink, flex basis, flex and align self. Let's check out the 6 one after the other. For order, this property is used to rearrange the visual position of the flex items within the container without altering the HTML structure. So what does this do? It just changes the order of the items. If the container is going 1 to 3, it changes it to 3 to 1. So that's what order does. It just changes the positioning of the items. So it accepts numeric values, which is a positive value, negative value, and 0. The default value is 0, and the items are arranged in ascending order based on their order value. So the items are arranged so that they go from negative to 0 and then upwards to positive values. So if you want to change the order or the position of your items, if you want a particular flex item to be the first item to be displayed, you have to give it a value, maybe a negative value. So that comes first because they all have a default value of 0. So if you give it a negative value, since it's moving in an ascending order, it will meet the negative value first before getting to 0. If you want it to come last, you can give it a very high positive value that is higher than the other flex items. So it's going to be displayed last. So let's check out an example. So we can see we have 3 divs here. The 1, 2, 3, and 4. We gave div 1 an order of 1, which means that's a positive value. And then div 2 an order of 0, which is the default value for the order. And then div 3 an order of -1, and div 4 an order of -2. So which one do you think we call first? Of course, -2, because like that's the smallest value there. So it goes from -2 to -1 to 0 and then to 1. So it goes 4, 3 to 1 now. You can change the order anyhow you like it, but this doesn't change the HTML structure. The HTML structure is still arranged 1, 2, 3, 4, but you're just using CSS to rearrange the position, which is the power of CSS and why it is very important for us to know. And then now we have flex grow. So the flex grow property is used to control how flex items grows if there's extra space available in the container relative to other items inside the flex container. If you have a container and you have a few items inside and there are still some extra spacing in the container, those spaces can be given to 1 or 2 of the flex items. Flex grow has a default value of 0. It doesn't have to grow or anything like that. But also note, flex items grows along the main axis, which is determined by the flex direction property. We've checked that before. So if it is for roll, it's only going to grow horizontally, the width is going to grow. If it is column, it's only going to grow vertically. So that is for flex item grow, and mostly every other property that we'll be checking out. So the first thing we can see here is 3 items in a container. 1, 2, 3. But you can see like there are still some spaces inside the container. Item 1 would like to grow bigger and take up some space in the container. You can give it a flex grow of 1. But also item 2 would also like to grow even bigger, so you give it a flex grow of 2. And then item 3, making it the biggest, a flex grow of 3. So now how do they share the space? This works in a ratio way, if you know ratios or proportions. So we have a ratio of 1:2:3. So the total ratio, the total flex grow is going to be 1 plus 2 plus 3, which is equals to 6. Now, how did they share this? Let's assume that the remaining space is 600 pixels. Div 1 is going to take 1 over 6 of the remaining space, which is 100 pixels. Div 2 is going to take 2 over 6 of the remaining space, which is 200 pixels, and then div 3 is going to take 3 over 6 of 600, which is the remaining space, and that's 300 pixels. So this is how these extra spaces are going to be added to the container. The reason it was said previously that the item is relative to other items is that it depends on how much the other items wants to grow that will determine the spacing. If div 2 will add a flex grow of 4, it will have a bigger value, so it will take more space. Now, if you should check out the new items, you can see item 1 grew a little, item 2 also grew a little more than 1, and then 3 more than the 2. So this is how flex grow works. But now let's check it out practically. Let me reduce the items back to 3. So if you should give item 1 an order of -3, and then we give item 2 an order of 1, and item 3 an order of 0. How do you think it's going to be arranged now? This order works in an ascending order. Smallest value is -3 followed by 0 then 1. So it's going to go item 1, item 3, then item 2. Let's check it out. So the reason this is currently reversed is because we are using our row reverse, flex direction of row reverse, so it has been swapped. If you should leave it as roll, it's going to follow the normal order. So item 1, item 3, then item 2. Now that we understand how order works and how order is used, we can move to flex group. Now we can see that like there's a lot of space for them to occupy, but it has to be along the main axis, and the main axis for this direction of roll is horizontal. So it's only the width of the item that will be growing. If it was column, it is the height of the item that will be growing. If I should give item 1 a flex grow of 1, this means it's going to grow all the way. It's going to take up the entire space, because the total ratio now is 1. And according to this, we take our flex grow divided by the total flex grow multiplied by the available space. So our flex grow is 1, the total flex grow is 1, because like the default value for flex grow is 0. Since I did add flex grow to the other items, they automatically have a flex grow of 0. So 1 plus 0 plus 0 will be what? Still 1. So 1 over 1 of the remaining space, we take the entire remaining space. So if you should check it out, you can see it took up the entire space, available space. The spacing here is from the gap. If I should change this to column, it's going to take up the entire space for the height, because the main axis now is vertical. If I should give this one a flex grow, what do you think is going to happen? Now the total flex grow is what? Is 3, 1 plus 2. Therefore, item 1 will take 1 over 3 of the remaining space, and item 2 will take 2 over 3 of the remaining space. So item 2 will be bigger than item 1. This is item 2 here, because we had an order there, that's why it's not following each other. If I do not give item 2 a flex grow, item 1 will take up the entire space. Now if I should give item 3 an even bigger flex grow, let's say of 5. So the total flex grow is what? It is 8. Item 1 takes 1 over 8, item 2 takes 2 over 8, and item 3 takes 5 over 8. So item 3 is way bigger. So that is how flex grow works. Now let's move on to the next thing, and that is flex shrink. So this property controls how a flex item will shrink relative to other items in the flex container. It's also relative to other items when there isn't enough space to fit all the items in their original sizes. So when the container is so small that the original sizes of the items cannot fit in the container, and it also does the same thing. Let's say we have a width of 200 pixels for every div, and then we give it a flex shrink. First div a flex shrink of 1, the second one a flex shrink of 2, and then the third one a flex shrink of 3. How is it going to work? First, we have to calculate the total flex shrink, just like ratios, proportions. The total flex shrink is 6. Let's assume the total width of the original container is just 500 pixels wide. So like it's very small, it can't take the entire items. So what do we have? We have a shortage of 100 pixels. So now we can divide how you want it to shrink between the items. So div 1 has 1 over 6 of 100, that is 16.67. 2 over 6 of 100, that's 33.3, and 3 over 6 of 100, that's 50 pixels. Now you take these new values that you got and subtract them from the original size of the item. So for div 1, it will have a width of 200 minus 16.67, and then div 2 with 200 minus 33.33, and then div 3 with 200 minus 50 pixels. So now we have div 1 bigger than div 2 and div 2 bigger than div 3. So that is how you use flex shrink. So now let's check it out on our code. I should give this a flex shrink of 1. This means that the item can shrink when necessary. This is the default value for flex shrink. And then I should give item 2 a flex shrink of 0. This means the items should not shrink. I didn't say this before because I wanted us to be able to see it. So flex shrink of with a value of 0 means the item should not shrink at all. So that's flex shrink of 0. And then if I should give this a flex shrink greater than 1, like 5, this is going to shrink faster than the rest. So flex shrink takes in positive integers only. So if we should save this and check it out in our browser, let's remove the order so we can see this properly. Now it's following the proper order. Let's make this responsive. But at this point where there's not enough space for the original size of the container, we can see that item 2 is not shrinking at all because we gave it a flex shrink of 0. But item 3 and item 1 is shrinking. You cannot physically see the difference now because the space is small and the difference is very little, so we can't see it. But item 3 has the higher shrink. Now let's move on to the next property. This is flex basis. This property defines the initial size of the flex item before any flex grow or flex shrink values are applied. So it takes in 3 different values. It takes in length value. This is pixels, rem, em, and so on. It takes in percentages and also auto. Auto is the default value, and this means it takes in the original size of the item. So that's what auto does. But note, flex basis can override the width or height of the item depending on the flex direction, which is the main axis. Now let's take this for example. We have 3 divs. We gave it a width of 200 pixels, but we gave it a flex basis of 300 pixels. And as you can see, for flex direction of roll, the width is now 300 pixels because we gave it a flex basis of 300 pixels. Because the main axis here is horizontal, it is overriding the width. For flex direction of column, it is overriding the height because the main axis is vertical. So now let's check out flex basis in our code editor. Let's give this a flex basis of 500 pixels. Can you see that item 1 is big? It is automatically bigger than the rest, even though the flex grow is just 1. This means the initial width for item 1 is going to be 500 pixels before growing or anything. To show you for the height, if you should give this a flex direction of column, it's going to be overriding the height instead of the width. So that's why the main axis is important. Now we also have the flex property. The flex property is just a shorthand property to combine flex grow, flex shrink, and flex basis. So it's a faster way for us to implement all 3. So the syntax is flex, and then you put the flex grow, then the flex shrink, and then the flex basis. So you can just easily combine all 3 in one property. We have align self property. So this property is used to override the align items property for individual flex items. So it controls how a specific flex item is aligned along the cross axis of the container. We checked out align items previously, but if a particular flex item decide to have a different value for the align items, you can use align self and change the value for the position on the cross axis. So it takes in the following values: auto, stretch, center, baseline, flex start, and flex end, just like align items. But for auto means it is going to take the value for the align items of the parent element. So if the align items was stretch, the align self will also be stretch. So this is a basic example. For the flex direction of roll, the align items was given a value of center, so all the items are at the center, but you decided to give the second div an align self or flex start. Just the second div has the value of flex start, which is staying at the start of the cross section. So that is how align self work. Let's do a few more practicals and check out how they all work together. Let's give item 2 a align self of flex start. Now let's check this out. You can see that item 2 is not changing, it's still on the same line, Why? What's going on? Since we already gave it an align cell for flex start, it's supposed to go to the beginning of the cross axis, which is at the top here. But the main issue here is that we currently have flex wrap set to wrap reverse. If a flex wrap value of wrap or wrap reverse is added to your flex container, the browser automatically thinks that the items are currently in multiple lines, so it's going to give each line its own main axis and cross axis. So because each line has its own main axis and cross axis, when I use align self or flex start, the item is going to be taken into consideration the cross axis of the line and not the entire container. So if I should remove the flex wrap or comment it out, now it's going to be taking into consideration the entire container. So if I should give this an align self or flex end, just the same way it's going to go to the end. So that's how align self works. Now I want you to take your time to try out everything that we've talked about, because without practicing you can't really understand how Flexbox works. Anything you don't understand or anything you're having an issue getting, you can let me know in the comment section and I might do a video explaining this, or I can reply to you in the comment section. So thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like, comment and subscribe. Bye.